Okay, let's get straight into it. So we got proxyguy. Made my first animation. Need feedback. Cool. Okay, let's open it up a bit bigger. So first thing I like is the use of shadows and stuff that you got here. Nice and soft in the type of room. Maybe just heighten it up just a little bit, just to give the area a bit more light. And maybe adjust the angle a little bit more so it's got some more interesting shadows just onto either the right or the left. Maybe put the camera up a bit slightly, just so that, and maybe a bit tighter in, just so that we can focus a bit more on the cube rather than having all this extra air around the side. I like the use of reflections as well as a normal map on the cube. Maybe consider adding the cube, having a little bevel on there just so it can catch the light a little bit more. Also considering using motion blur as well, just as it moves fast you'll get a better idea of that spin and stuff going on there too. But yeah, so far really nice. Like, hopefully that sort of stuff helps. Maybe just consider as well adding a trim to these walls. So that little bottom bit of wood, just so it looks maybe a bit more realistic. But yeah, it's something that a lot of people overlook. Nice work, man. Alright, next one. Making this low poly kitchen. This is from Big Meatball. Making this low poly kitchen and I'm starting to like it, but it feels empty and I'm not sure if I should just make it messy or something. Thanks. Okay, let's have a look. So composition wise is pretty good. I would maybe either give it a little bit more room on the side or tighten it down a little bit on the top. And I would say that it looks a bit empty, maybe because of the lighting. So if you were to adjust the lighting a little bit, like maybe making the lighting through the window a little bit more prominent and maybe adding a secondary light source from over on this angle, it can help show the form of the shapes a little bit more. But really you have to start now looking at the areas that it's messy. So it would be this corner here where you might want to add a toaster, and maybe even these areas up here too, where you might want to put in some little like jars or something that have been collected, maybe a few magnets and stuff on the fridge. And down here it doesn't look too messy, but that's a place maybe where you might want to put like a table or something in, but I don't think that you'd want to put that in, leaving that area a bit more open. But I would say that yeah, like it's just looking at the areas that are empty and putting things in there, just little objects that will just break up basically those quite flat areas and stuff there. Maybe even adding in the little cross on the window just to add a little bit more detail possibly, or a tree behind it just to get something going. But it depends on the type of style and stuff that you're going for, where this is quite a contained room. I still do highly recommend looking into a secondary light source just to light up these areas, because it is a little bit dark. Like if you would just punch it up just a little bit more. And then we've got a Marfin Art one, just started working on this. It's going to be Beast Boy. Okay, so I would look into for you, just look into the if this is going to be animated, what they call topology, or like the polygon loops and stuff. So what will happen is around this eye, if it's opening and closing, what they tend to have is like a loop of polygons going around, so then it can move and squish a whole lot easier. So a simple way that you could do this is just select all the edges just around here and just like extrude it inwards, and then you make some adjustments and stuff so it looks correct. But it's just having those edge loops, as well as having relatively similar sized shaped squares. So rather than having quite long pieces, it'd be better to have just an extra like edge or two going through there, so it's a bit more cut, just so it's like a bit more of the same size polygon squares. So I would look into topology for your modeling. And also put on shade smoothing and stuff while you're modeling as well. It could just give a bit more of a final look, and it might help you have a better vision for what it will be in the finished product. As well, if this is going to be low poly, like keep going with how you're going, but also I'd look into using subdivision and exploring even a bit of sculpting too, to just get a better shape going on. Like, it's a great shape as it is, but it's just be good to look into those tools to help improve the model that you're working on. No, it's really nice. It's a great start. Okay, then we've got Mr. Black 907. We've got the Styus Lothan MP34 in Blender, Substance Painter. The most complex game-ready asset to date. Let me know what you think. Alright, let's have a look. So, first things first, I would probably consider using a HDRI to help. If, like, I know this is a game asset, but just I'm probably going to say things to improve the render as a whole, just to give you some advice. But yeah, look into a HDRI if you haven't used one already, just to add a bit more reflection and stuff to the piece. But I'll try and consider that this is a game asset, and so you're trying to minimize the detail and stuff that you've got going on. Really nice model so far, like really nice choice of textures. Nice normal map as well that you've got going on here. I like how it's curved around there, and that the UV texture seems to fit really nicely. I'd maybe just look into, because I'm not sure myself, if the brushed movement would be going across this way or along horizontal. Something maybe just to look into, but if you know that, that's fine. I just thought I'd mention that. It definitely does have that sort of game asset-y feel, where it's like you can sort of just see hints of the polygon like edges and stuff, which I think really does add to the aesthetic, as well as how you kind of know the normal map sort of look like it's realistic but not hyper realistic, which I actually kind of like. Let's go to the next picture. And yeah, I would just look into, when you're rendering, just look into your anti-aliasing and stuff, just so you can smooth out that those corners a little bit more. Maybe look into adding a bit of bloom just on your renders, just to make it a bit brighter in those sort of areas and pop out with the light. I'm not sure if you have, but looking into ambient occlusion, I think you might have. But yeah, just a bit of ambient occlusion just to get those little like edge bits just a bit shadowier. And you might have actually put a HDRI on. It's just sometimes it doesn't show up on these, but yeah, no, like it's looking really nice. I'm trying to think of how I would sort of improve it, but yeah, overall you've got some really nice renders and stuff, and really nice composition. I would maybe make the image maybe slightly more flat, like as in the model, just rotating it slightly so it's a bit more horizontal, but that's sort of just me, so it would fit in the space a little bit nicer, since there's not much breathing room up the top and bottom here, just giving it a little bit more extra room. But yeah, definitely like really nice normal maps. Maybe using a slightly colored light rather than a white light, just to make it have a bit more life to the scene. Really nice bullets. Again, yeah, just looking into anti-aliasing if you can, or like rendering in a higher resolution, just so that it doesn't have that that squareness and stuff. Yeah, that's all I'm really going to say about that. You've got a really nice model here, really nice stylized sort of look, and you've got, I would say, a really good idea of all the different types of elements too. It's maybe just looking into those minor details, more so maybe for the rendering part than the actual modeling part. But since you were focusing on the model, like that's easy. You're going great. All right, next one. Edcast. I'm really struggling making landscapes. I was hoping you could help me. I can improve. Rip me apart. All right. So I would say that this is a generally pretty good understanding of composition. Maybe just like bring the camera back and slightly up a little bit, just so we've got a little bit more room on the top of this this pole here, and we've got a lot of grass down the bottom there, so we might be able to cut out a little bit of that just to give a bit more sense of space in this room. I do really like the models and stuff that you've got going on. Probably the weakest part so far is this big hill and maybe the cow. So let's have a bit more of a look in. Because, yeah, like, the cow's not too bad, especially with it being in the distance. But I'd maybe just sculpt the face just a little bit more and maybe look into the position of the legs. Maybe even making the cow bending down to eat some grass. And same with the duck, yeah, like, because it's in the distance, it's easy to get away with a bit less detail. But yeah, like, so maybe just looking into those two models just a little bit more to get a bit more realism, but they're alright. With the hill, I would consider imagining how it was probably formed over the years and stuff. This looks like some grass. And while there's some flowers and stuff and little branches and everything on these parts, maybe consider adding some more mess and stuff to the hills in the background, just to break it apart a little bit more. This tree, I'm pretty happy with this tree. Like it's got some nice leaves and movement, and it's nice use of colouring and stuff too. It's hard to tell, but just considering using, I think you have used a slightly yellowed light in this scene. Yeah, and that sort of stuff will just bring a bit more warmth to the scene. And don't forget too, maybe of using a secondary light coming from the opposite angle of like a slight blue, just to heighten up some of the little areas on the opposite side. I would also consider using how you've got in the background here, these sort of rocks. I would consider actually maybe redoing these rocks, because it's sort of, I think you were going for mountains, but these more just look like maybe some carved rocks. So I would be looking into actual mountains a little bit more, just to make it a bit more realistic, and then be using them over in this area here too, just to give it a nice consistency over, like even just a little tip on this area here and this area here. And also considering using depth of field in the background as well, just a little bit. So maybe like that would give a bit of a different look, that sort of miniature model look, especially if you have it in the front here. But it could be a nice look. It's just that how this front area is blurry, but then that quite at the back is in focus, where I would say that maybe like the cow and the tree should be the ones in focus, same with the electric poles or whatever they were, and having that more as in the focus. Just considering about that. Also another part would be thinking about your focal point too, as like, because this hill is quite simple, it's quite taking quite a lot of focus, where I feel like you're trying to show everything in the scene, and it kind of takes away from the scene as a whole, where it could be better to have a bit more of a focus, say on the tree or on the cow, and build things around that rather than trying to put every little model in that you've got. And it'll just make a bit more of a story, a bit more of a relaxed composition. Yeah, like, so maybe making this tree slightly overlap this guy here. And maybe adding in 2 or 3 more trees around the scene, just to keep it a bit more balanced. With the nice big tree, maybe adding in some bushes and stuff too around, like especially at the joining of this fence here. And because the fence is modelled, I would say, quite nicely, like because it's definitely matching in with some of the looks of the other models around the scene. I really like your use of mushrooms and stuff around here too, but yeah, definitely try and continue it up onto these hills in the background. And I would probably also look a bit into bloom, just to capture just some slight bits of like the white lights shining a bit back onto the camera. And yeah, hopefully that helps. Like, that's all I'm going to say about this picture right now, but yeah, hopefully that gives you some information. And now we've got Dean9244, made this a few days ago following a tutorial. What do you think? All right, let's have a look. Yeah, so this is really nice. Like, I like the the background here, like the colors that you've used, the direction of light and the fog and everything too. I like the sort of hills and stuff that you've got going on. I would just maybe consider adding another hill, possibly in the foreground here, just to give it a bit more depth, as it's quite empty in the foreground here. Like we do have this section here, and that's nice just to have a nice lit up bit, but I would sort of maybe balance it out a little bit as well on this other side too. And maybe just rotating the camera up slightly so we have a little bit more sky and a little bit less down here. That's sort of, you'll need to test that out and experiment with that. But and also maybe looking into how we've got this lone tree up here, maybe just adding a few more in here, or like just experimenting with that, because it kind of stands out a bit too much. Like it's nice to have a little lone tree up there, but I think just maybe the positioning, or maybe just having it a bit more blended with the other trees around could make it look a bit more natural, because it looks unnatural at the moment. And I like, yeah, your use of how it's got like that sort of hazy look. I would consider maybe adding in some birds and stuff too that are flying around, just to give a nice sense of scale. And maybe, because I think you do have some in the background here too of like hills, but just maybe adding in like an extra hill that can blend from that really hazed look and then into like the darker look here. So yeah, like it's really nice. Maybe even thicken up that fog a little bit too, to give like an extra element to the scene, rather than just making the trees a little bit hazier. Make that haze its own element, which could really add a more depth and stuff to the scene. But great work. I can definitely see the like a little Aztec or something monument or something in here, like El Dorado, something like that. But yeah, no, it's really cool. Our next person, we got MushDad. Super simple render, but does the model and lighting look realistic? Okay. So what did you say? The model and the lighting. Okay. So I would say that, yeah, with the model you've got a high enough poly count. The slight imperfections do really add to the sort of realistic shape. You've definitely used, or it's hard to say if this is a HDRI or not. This might be just two separate lights, like area lights. So I would consider looking into HDRI if you haven't already. That'll add some nice reflections to it. I would up your render resolution just so we can see all like really nice details and stuff in there too. Maybe consider adding like a minor amount of bloom too into the scene, as well as considering how this reflects onto the ground. Maybe because it looks like it might be glass, to have some refraction, I think it is, like just some different dancing lights here. So it might even be better to have a harsher light to emphasize those parts. And so like I do like the sort of soft look that you've got going on here, but also yeah, considering adding a bit more context to the picture by adding a bit more detail in the background, like having this say on a table with maybe a blurred wall in the background. You could do this quite easily by making a table and then even just taking a photo of something in your house as the background and just blurring it heaps. Making sure that you've got a similar angle and a similar lighting setup. But yeah, that can really add like a bit more realism and stuff too, especially how this could then bend the light and everything going through from that render, from that image in the background. And yeah, like it does look quite realistic, but yeah, I'd just be looking at how the shadows and stuff are affecting the ground too, because that'll add a whole lot more realism too, as well as looking in maybe at a slightly lower angle of taking the image, because that will probably end up giving a bit more realism as well to the actual scene, where if it's taken from a higher photo, it looks a little bit less natural than if someone was looking at it a little bit more straight on. But yeah, hopefully those will give you some things to consider. Like, doesn't mean you need to follow it all, but I'd just rather you consider it and acknowledge it and then choose whether or not you want to use that sort of stuff. So you're actively going against it rather than by accident not doing it. Hopefully, yeah, that helps heaps. All right, then we've got Great Gazelle 4586. Any idea on how to improve my old model and image, apart from terrain in the background? Okay. So I would first off just render with a slightly higher resolution, just so we can see some extra details and stuff in here. And yeah, I'm going to ignore everything in the background and just focus on this model then. And so first things first, I would look into not making the texture repeat so much, and maybe trying to give like a bit more of a nicer blend with this metal going into this other metal, which could just be adding a little indent along this seam here, just so it looks like it's actually like connected on, rather than it being quite flat and then there being like a really harsh seam. Just giving it a bit more of a bump in there, or even building it up with like another bit of like metal across the top, just so it looks a bit more like it's a seam. I would look into having maybe a few more references for your models, just so that you can get the aerodynamic look of that sort of curve, as well as the curve in this cockpit, which might be a little bit more difficult for you, but I think it'll add a whole lot more realism and stuff to it too. And then same goes for in the wings, just maybe looking into a few more reference materials, just to get a bit more realistic looks going on. Maybe adding a bit more thickness slightly to this section here, just because the plane is has a bit more thickness and stuff to it. So just keeping a bit of that thickness in this section here. And I would look into adding the little nuts and bolts and stuff in their correct positions, but I think mostly building this from a top-down view with the silhouette of a plane can really help add correct shapes and stuff to it. And yeah, just thinking maybe more, if you're not wanting to use a reference, thinking more contextually about why things are placed where, and like looking into how people build planes, so you can design this a bit more realistically, like in terms of maybe how the person enters this plane, where their landing gear would be, aerodynamically how these things would be placed, where the moving parts and stuff would be and how they're connected on, where the, say, weak points would be and like connecting points, just so then you might want to add maybe some more slight dust or damage and stuff to those areas. Things like that would be the stuff that I'd be considering. And yeah, hopefully that helps with everything, and hopefully it gives you some insight into stuff you can do. I know we've got Chromulus. A lot of first with this one. I usually stick to hard surface modeling. All right, so this is some new stuff for you. Okay, so first things first, I would light this this area up a little bit more. I'm just going to go into GIMP just to lighten it up. I feel like you could use two separate lights with this, having maybe a point light that's just a little bit brighter to light up these scenes. I would maybe look into pictures of fire, or go and look at a fire yourself and see how much it actually lights up the area. And then secondly, I'd look into having a bit more of a blue light around from where the direction of the moon would be. So yeah, see, now that we can see some more details and stuff in here. Now obviously this is quite light, where you probably wouldn't have a fire when it's this bright, but now it just actually makes me allowed to see the models that you've got going on. And because I think that, yeah, my brightness is up pretty much full. Okay, so in terms of proportion, I'd just be looking into how big things are in relation to one another. So maybe like, I would say maybe you've built this later on, maybe, because it just either, it looks like it might be in the distance, but it doesn't look like that because it's got this strip here in front of the rock, or it's just quite small. So I'd just be looking into your proportions and stuff too, with relation to other things. Your trees actually look really nice. Like I like both of the like this tree, and I think this is a different one here too. They're all really nice. I'd consider looking into a background that actually has some clouds or some different gradients and stuff in there too, just to add a bit more detail, because you do have that nice foggy look, but I think you could have a little bit more detail in the sky. I would probably just put the camera angle slightly up so that it's not so flush to the ground, just to give a little bit more view on that grass, and it'll give a bit more of a human point of view, unless you are going for, like, say a dog or even like an ant's point of view in this. But yeah, like just to sort of give it a bit more of a realistic proportions and stuff. And also considering maybe these flowers being maybe slightly too big, but I don't know this species, so it could be that size. And maybe looking into other different types of plants. I do like that you've used this one in the foreground, but I might just move it over a little bit more so it's a bit more predominant, and then having something else a little bit more, even like another one of those flowers on this other side, just so it closes the eyes in a little bit more on the scene. With this fire, it's quite in line with this tree, so I would either move the tree or move the fire slightly to the side, just so that their lines don't line up perfectly, just because it sort of looks, and I know it's not, but it looks like the tree's on fire, just because we don't have that sense of scale or positioning and stuff. So just to make sure that their lines are a little bit off, I would position this rock a little bit behind these flowers, just so we can break up the silhouette of it a little bit more, and maybe using another rock even over here, if we're not going to move those flowers, just to give a bit more of rocks just around the scene itself. I would consider yeah, just like adding a bit more fold and stuff in this tent, and with a higher angle as well, you can get a bit more context of how it's joining into the ground, especially as what this thing is here, which it's hard to tell. Maybe it's like a plank of wood or something like that. But just I think by having that higher angle and then a bit more folds in there too, it'll have that more realistic look, as if it's like sinking down. Maybe just a few more imperfections and stuff around there, like little bits of dirt, even just like having a quick texture of like reflectivity or metallic sort of look, so it looks like it might have been like rained on, or it's slightly wet. And yeah, like the fire and stuff's really good. I would maybe just look into the size of these embers just to make them a little bit smaller. Look into adding bloom on the fire and stuff too, just so it can capture a bit more of the light emanating from it. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Hopefully that gives you a whole lot of stuff to look into and just develop your skills. But yeah, hopefully that helps. Okay, we've got Nubino, future gallery. All right, let's have a look. Oh, interesting. Okay, so we've got a sort of see-through train look in here with some sort of abstract shapes in the background. Okay, so first thing's composition. So I would say that we could maybe just raise the train and the floor up slightly, just so it's a little bit closer to these areas here, like just so it's like shrunk down a little bit, and then maybe cut off a little bit more of this ground, just so it's a bit more of a tighter look. Then we could maybe tighten it in just a little bit more. I feel like there's just a lot of room, up in this area here. Now you could keep it that way, and if that's like the kind of look that you're going for, this is just sort of my eye sort of seeing that it could be a little bit tighter together, creating like a nicer, maybe a more like full image, but it gives a different feel if everything's a little bit spread apart too. So that's up to you, but just something to consider. I do like your reflection on the ground here. I feel like maybe there just wasn't enough not enough resolution in the lights, giving this grainy look, although you might have a bit of a texture on the ground. And so it's just something to think about when you're putting that stuff in. And I do like, I think you've used a HDRI, maybe you haven't. I think this is just reflecting the normal sky that we've got. So I'd be considering putting in a HDRI just to add a little bit of extra reflections and stuff going around the image. I like that. I think there's a little bit of a motion blur as if this is moving on the ground, which I really like. It could be maybe a little bit more predominant, but I think then that would blur the image a bit too much. So yeah, that's just something maybe to think about with why you're using this motion blur and if it's taking away from the image or adding to it. I do like these. I think that maybe you could just add a little bit more to these edges just so they're not blocky. Sorry. Just so they're not blocky at the top. And I feel like you could maybe show the edge here just a little bit more so that the shape pops out a little bit more. So maybe using just a slightly more intense light just to create a bit of a bigger difference between these sort of planes here. And maybe consider using depth of field, and I'm not sure if you have, but a bit of bloom too, just to make those light areas pop just that little bit more. I like the use of light that you've got going on here, but I feel like it's sort of more capturing these back pillars than the train itself. So maybe consider about the placement of the light just to really bring a bit more focus to this train rather than it looking like it's in the shadows a little bit more. But yeah, great model that you've got. Really great sort of scene setup and everything too. I'd also maybe go into, say, something like GIMP or Photoshop just to adjust the colors slightly in post, just to make sure that you're completely happy with it in terms of like contrast and the hue and saturation and colors and stuff that you got going on. But yeah, no, that's really nice. Hopefully the stuff that I said helps. Now we've got chicken feet for you. My first render that isn't a donut. Any critiques of how I could improve would be really helpful. Spent way too long on it. I want to call it done and move on, but I'd love to go back to it and work on it more at some point. Still very new to this, so I'm not sure what needs work the most. Thanks in advance. Okay, so the first thing I would say is that these things that light up the scene aren't as bright as probably what they would be in real life. So I'm just going to create this. I'm just going to make it a little bit brighter just so we can see what's going on here. All right, interesting. So we've got a kind of strange particle effect here. Either that or it's a texture on this mirror here. So I would try to make things like lighting up the actual environment just a little bit more. Yeah, because I think this is just, it's composed okay in terms of balance of things just at the moment, but I would be using maybe a point light in the middle of both of these major shapes and even the connection loss stuff, just to give a bit more light around, which you might have done, but just giving it a bit more of an oomph, or emphasizing the emission and stuff that it's got, just so I can spray light a little bit more around. I do like the model that you've got here. It's quite simplistic and stuff, and you're trying to show its strengths and stuff, which is really good. I would probably heighten the reflection of this here just so it's a bit more predominant in your original image, and consider how people are reading this scene. This ground here is, I would say, where his bed is on, but then it's behind, oh sorry, it's in front of this big sphere here. So I'm not sure about with this reflection, like things aren't clear about how they're placed around the scene. So like these sort of things here, it's hard to know what they're actually for. Like I would say that the connection loss relates to this sort of thing here, where it's maybe like an information hologram thing, but this big blue sphere as well, I'm not sure what's going on there. So just considering stuff like that. I would be also considering that this is like two pictures in one, where this ball takes a lot of focus away from the emotional things that are going on here. So you could even, if we're going to do something with this, we could like crop it where now it's sort of like its own image here, and it's got the focal point, like two sort of major focal points that really tie in together. And now it's creating a bit more of an actual scene, rather than with this section here, where you might want to just compose it kind of nice. You might want to just have this as its own separate thing, so that now it's like an image on its own, where it doesn't really tell much of a story, but it's like, it looks a bit more like a full image here. And I think it's a common thing for 3D artists to try and put everything that they've done in the one scene. But yeah, I think that maybe consider about how you're doing storytelling through your image a bit more, and trying to avoid things that distract or don't make sense in the image. But yeah, no, like, it's definitely coming along. I think you're, it would be good to visit this after you've explored some other stuff. But yeah, there's a few little things in there that you can change and work on. It's nice. Okay, then we've got drink more caffeine. Is this considered low poly? So we've got two images here. We have the scene that's textured and then untextured. So in terms of low poly, there's a lot of different styles of low poly that are going around. As someone commented on your post, that it does really depend on just as much artistically as what it does in terms of low poly. And so I would say that yes, I would consider this low poly, but there's a few different factors and stuff to it. So because you could add in say a normal map and then making this a bit more bumpy, and like technically it would be low poly in terms of if you was using this for a game, but in terms of the artistic look, then it wouldn't really look low poly. Like say if you were to just color this in flat colors, then it would be considered more artistically low poly, but there doesn't tend to be these sort of close together bevels in a low poly artistic sort of sense. You might have just one of these going around, and then you wouldn't have these sort of cylinders with such high poly sort of looks. Like they might be like maybe 6 or like even not even 8, like 7 polygons around, because you'd want to be showing the polygon on each section. Like that would be the predominant thing that you'd be looking at, rather than it being just a low poly model. And because sometimes things don't need to be low poly to actually be low poly artistically. Like you could have a high poly model in terms of all its little extra bevels and stuff, but it has the look of a low poly model, which, you know, it's like the blend between the artistic side and the mechanical, like actual theoretical side of low poly. Now, but just to look at your model here, because on the models here, it's starting to catch the light in a little bit of a strange way, and so I would actually recommend cutting these polygons to be a bit more flat, rather than, I would say, this is one big polygon. So just separate these pieces just so I can smooth a bit better and catch the light a bit more. Yeah, like you've definitely got a nice look going on. Nice use of textures. I feel like this scene still needs to have a lot more stuff added, and I think you're just checking in with everything too, especially like the ground and the sky and like the stuff that this would be connecting on. So I'm not going to do so much of a critique on this, but composition and coloring and stuff is nice. Maybe just punch that that lighting up just a little bit more, and consider using a more yellow light or a bluer light or something, just to give the lighting a bit more color, and it'll just tie in the scene a whole lot more. giving it a bit more warmth or coolness or something like that. And possibly even with these models here, maybe just consider flipping one so that the leaves don't all follow in the same way and it looks completely repeated. That's just me. Sorry. Excuse me. Pardon me. Okay, so hopefully that helps with everything. Alright, now we've got Old Home Metro. When you can't render in Google Colab rigid body, you cycles it in 5 samples to be fast on the CPU. Alright, took 25 minutes to render, 125 frames. Alright, let's have a look. Okay, nice. So, I do like the use of reflections. It could be, just while you're mucking around with this stuff, maybe take off reflections and do it, so you can have a higher sample rate. Consider maybe adding in motion blur, and then once it's rendered, going into a post-production software and adding in bloom and stuff too. You can add in motion blur in video editing software, like I use DaVinci Resolve, which is really nice. But yeah, I think that also you can do this sort of stuff in post too. Maybe just consider how this is clipping through too, as you can sort of see. Just something to look into, especially how it's clipping through the ground. But I would say that this is still a new exploring like thing for you with using rigid body stuff. But yeah, it's definitely like good. I really like your use of colors and your use of composition, as well as, yeah, so I would say it's focusing on this cube here. So I would probably more use a custom camera animation, just because it's quite high up the camera at this moment and there's not a lot of room down the bottom. And so I would probably render it out and then just record it, like, just to have a bit more control. But I would say that this is probably done really quickly, so I'm not going to be like too harsh on that. But yeah, and maybe just extending this plane out into the distance, adding a bit of fog so that the fog turns black, just so it blurs a bit nicer. Or adding this so it curves up a little bit more, so you've got the flat plane and then it just curves up with like a few polygons in there that are smooth shaded, just so it looks like it's in a room. Maybe using 2 lights, but as well, I don't want you to go too slow with your rendering. That maybe is just for like future things. But yeah, no, this is nice. I think you've probably learnt a lot from it, and yeah, hopefully you can take a bit of what I said, maybe a few future projects. Hopefully that helps. All right, now we've got NEV on. I hope I'm using shallow depth of field correct. People use it for artistic purposes, but I had to do it to hide defects. All right, shallow depth of field. Yeah, so I would actually, with this, maybe drop the camera to be a little bit closer to this table so that half the shot isn't out of focus. So maybe even like something like this, but then having the camera angle slightly up just so we can see the background a little bit more. Or even being a little bit more focused on this person or like this dragon here, so that it's not as a predominant thing in the shot. Because then this guy and the table are taking up a lot more of the scene, and it'll be a little bit more tighter. And so then you can still have that depth of field stuff going on, which can add a really nice look. Models and stuff look really nice. I really like the lighting and stuff that you've got going on. Really nice choice of materials. I'd maybe consider making the normal map just a slight bit more predominant, so then it can be showing up in the shadows just a little bit more. I like your use of, I think you have a little bit of bloom on here, yeah. I really like that use. And maybe just adding in a slight point light. Oh, you've sort of got some light coming on here, but maybe just making the yellow, or sorry, the orange a little bit more predominant, but that's something up to you to test out. And yeah, it's quite a shallow depth of field here, which is nice. Like, I like that the front of the table is blurred as well, just to give it a nice tighter sort of feel. But yeah, I feel like that you should definitely make it a little bit tighter in this shot, or on the table a little bit more, because I feel like the dragon is definitely, like, I didn't notice it until I zoomed in, and so you could maybe make it a little bit more predominant, either with lighting or yeah, just cropping it in. And yeah, like, you've definitely got some good models and stuff that you've been using here, and good use of lighting and little imperfections and stuff on the table. Nice understanding of materials. Maybe just upping the resolution slightly here, just because it looks a little bit grainy, but that might not be the resolution, that might be something else. Yeah, so I think it's really for you, it's just looking into, I think you've got a good understanding of the depth of field as an effect, but I think that now it's just more slightly in the composition, where composing it maybe so that the things that are blurred aren't the primary focus, or like, yeah, that, and so that's just the main thing I'd be saying with this. It's just composition and knowing where you're actually wanting to focus, because you could have this a little bit darker and then maybe having another light shining a bit more predominantly on this dragon, just to bring a bit more attention and stuff to it. But yeah, that does change your scene a little bit more. Yeah, hopefully that helps. All right, now we've got the Blue World contest entry for those who can't see it. Okay. So I feel like this image could just have a little bit more contrast, just to make the character pop out a little bit more. So I'm just going to put it in here, just because this pink, all the pinks seem to flow together a little bit more. So I'm going to try and get it to pop out a little bit more. And now I know that it does make it have a bit of a different look to your scene, but it just gives a little bit more of a separation between the background and this character. It looks maybe like you've got a HDRI maybe in the background, or some sort of blurry image. I'd just be either looking at covering that up so it's not as blurred, or yeah, using like a high resolution image in the background there. I'd smooth shade these models so they're not as boxy, unless that's the look you're going for, because this is quite a abstract sort of strange image and stuff that you've got going on here. I'd look into composition, so making sure that this focus character is slightly to maybe the left or right. I would put him over here a little bit more, just so that it gives a bit less area on here, this side here, and a little bit more area on the side that he's looking. In terms of your fur and stuff too, yeah, maybe just considering adding a little bit more resolution in, like, maybe the arm here too, so you can add a little bit more fur here too. I like the painted look and stuff that you got going on. It's got quite a styled look to this. That's sort of oh, it's hard to describe, but like yeah, there's some what people would probably generally call flaws or something in this. You're using it to your strengths, and so I would just be like looking into harnessing that skill a little bit more, exploring a little bit more with it, and looking into maybe some post-processing effects like bloom, so that this white area can shine off a little bit more, and yeah, and looking into bring this into a program afterwards, possibly, unless that goes against the contest, where you can just give it a little bit more saturation, maybe a little bit more lightness, and change the hue just a little bit if you needed to, especially if we're wanting to adjust just the one color, and maybe making that, like, the greens a little bit more predominant and stuff too. But that's like, because you can see, yeah, that this is quite a gray image now. So in the scene, probably lighten up the lights, like make them a bit more intense, and maybe use a slightly colored light for your lights. Maybe a slight, for this, maybe a slight blue or purple, or you could go a green or any sort of colors, just exploring the different colors and stuff that you have. And yeah, because it's quite a stylized look, it's hard to really critique your modeling in any sort of sense, just because of I don't want to bring you out from your own style too much. But hopefully those sort of things give you a bit of an indication about stuff that you could explore in your future pieces. Hopefully that helps. Alright, now we've got Crazy for Anime. I made this cool animation and wanted to share it with you here. Let me know how I can improve it. Alright, let's have a look. Alright, nice. So, first thing I would probably actually say is maybe changing the direction so it goes from the direction you would read it, rather than going from a reverse way. Just because it'll give a bit more emphasis on the actual words that we're reading here. In terms of the actual effect, it is really nice. Like, there are some minor flaws with the polygons and stuff, as they're like catching some little areas. I'm more just looking at this E here, how there's it's just down in this, but I wouldn't be too fussed about that, because with its speed as it goes through, it's something that you wouldn't really pick up on too much, and it doesn't really take away from the look at all. I like the use of colors and stuff that you've got in here, and the use of textures and stuff too. Like the use of bloom and everything too that you've got going on here. Maybe just looking into it with different color choices if you haven't already. Maybe even using, if you haven't, just a slight motion blur. Like, it might not make much of a difference, but it might just smooth out some little areas. And maybe looking into having a slightly different colored background, or maybe a textured background that could change the look of it a little bit too. But now I'm sort of just saying things that you could explore rather than to really majorly improve the piece. But yeah, no, this is a great effect that you've got going on. Like, I'll just be exploring with the different elements now to try and get something that really shows the different looks and stuff. So you might have a more like natural looking one compared to maybe a more like cyber style one, like cyberpunk one, or a bit more like of a like earthy rocky one or something like that, by just using different colors and effects and thickness and stuff, as well as looking into the font that you're using too, and the different texture that's gone over the top. The main thing I would really just say is maybe consider making it go the other way, yeah, just making it going the other way, even making it a bit more thin too, so it could be more like a stream or strip going along. But yeah, it's really good. Like, you're doing great stuff. Okay, and then we've got DoctorToMode. I've designed a DIY macro pad. I think that's DIY maybe. DIY macro pad, and created this schematic as visual aid for those who want to build it. Alright. Cool. Okay, so really interesting sort of things here. I'm going to talk about your use of materials and your render rather than the model, because the model does look actually quite nice. And yeah, so the first thing I would say is these I would say are a bit reflective. Consider adding a HDRI so that you can have a bit more natural reflections going on, rather than it being quite flat. Like it'll just add just some slight little gradients and stuff to it, making it look a bit more realistic. I like your use of light, but I think that you can consider adding just a slightly yellow light to make it a bit more natural, or maybe even a slightly blue light. Like it can be very subtle, but it'll just tie everything in together a whole lot more. Looking into ambient occlusion too, just to make a slight shadow on these edge pieces here, and just to make it tie in a little bit to the ground, a little bit more. I like your use of normal map on the ground here too. Maybe it's just slightly too low a resolution, so I'd just be considering maybe just trying to find a slightly higher resolution one, or something like, or doing post-processing effects on the image, like editing the effect, the image a little bit more, just to give it a bit more sharpness. In terms of composition, I feel like this part here is composed quite well. Maybe you could just have a little bit more room on the top. This piece here could be moved in, maybe in this area here, just so we have a little bit of room around each part, and maybe just cutting off just a slight section of this, just so that we can focus on the model a bit more than the background here, because this amount of area is taking my attention just a little bit away from the model. And so I would also add a little bit of bloom just to give a little bit more light to shine off from these white bits. And as well, just looking into the direction of your light, just so you can maybe have it slightly lower and catch in these areas here too, just so that because these are all sort of falling in shadow a bit, it'd be nice at least to have at least predominantly these front two and a little bit of this third one here to have just a little bit more light. So I would look into the intensity of your lights, and it looks like maybe possibly you've got two lights. I think you've only got the one here coming along, but I could be wrong. But just maybe having a slightly yellow light and then a secondary light that's of lower intensity, maybe about half the intensity, and it being maybe a slight blue or just a slightly different color, maybe even just like an orangey or a green or something like that. Just it'll add a bit more shape to the model, and also considering how far apart you move these models, just because if you're trying to present the model as it is, it could be good to have a little bit extra room, possibly just to present some of the little sections a bit more. I would be happy with this as it is, but it just could be important just to explore the different thicknesses and stuff of it all. I think there's a guy on Instagram called Richard Parry who does stuff very much like this, and it could be good to look into how he presents his pieces. And also because of the nature of this piece, maybe and like thinking about his Richard Parry's works, it could be good to even remove the floor and background and using just a flat sort of color, or a color maybe with a slight gradient and vignette around the outside, just so that the focus is a lot more on the actual model rather than the background so much. And I feel like, yes, definitely you've got the key light here, but you need to add a bit more of a fill light just to add in the like lighten up these areas on the front here. And I would say maybe you're using slight depth of field, which is really nice to give a bit of sense of scale, but I would probably move this model in just a little bit closer to this one here, just to make it a little bit tighter. Like I'd be looking into product images and stuff too, just to get a bit of an idea about how people present products like this, and how, especially how they position the models, light it and compose it and everything too. But so far, great work. I'm loving all the model and stuff that you've got going on, the different materials. And yeah, there's just a few things in terms of rendering and lighting and stuff that you need to look into a bit more. But nice. All right, so we've got Avatus. It isn't much, but I made my first non-donut model. Any tips on how to improve, and what should I be doing to move forward to Master Blender? Okay, so you had 3 images here, but I just took out 2 because this is sort of similar to the other ones. First thing I would look into is just the polygons. Maybe for this model, adding a few more polygons just to smooth out the area here. A little bit more resolution, just so it doesn't look as blocky. Like you can still have it, but just maybe not as sharp, just so it's a bit more rounded. I would look into your UV mapping, just because how of the wood grain goes in two separate directions here. So looking into that and how it's presented, so it looks a bit more realistic. I would be adding in a slight amount of bloom, just it might not even be noticeable, but just to give it a bit more of a lighter shine in some areas. And yeah, especially looking into your UV maps, I think is probably your primary focus. Adding a bit more resolution around here by adding a slight bevel, just so the shadows aren't as harsh and can transition a little bit more, as well as being able to catch a little bit more light on the edges there. Your use of materials though with the metal is nice, and I think you might be using a HDRI to give a little bit more detail into those. If not, definitely look into HDRIs just to add a bit more in the reflective surfaces. If it isn't already, I would maybe make this wood just a little bit more reflective, just on the tiniest little bit, just so it can capture things as if it looks like it's a brushed, like a lacquered wood. But it does depend on the look that you're going for. And I would use a slightly colored light just to add maybe like a slightest yellow or slightest blue or something. I think yellow would be looking nice here. It'll just tie in the image a whole lot more and give a bit more of a realistic look. I would also look into 3-point lighting for this. So you would have at the moment what they would call a key light, and you could maybe add it a bit more on a harsher angle so that there's a bit more room on this side here in shadow, because then you would use a secondary light over here about half the intensity and maybe a slightly different color, just to what they would say fill in this area in the back here. And then you would use another harsh light from behind that would be called a rim light, which will just catch just the edge bits here of the model. But I would be using this more when it's say in this position here and maybe a little bit down lower, just because it can be hard sometimes to line up the lighting and everything too. But so far your lighting is pretty good, but yeah, I'd just be exploring different ways of lighting the scene. And I like a use of depth of field here just to give a sense of scale and everything too. Maybe just looking a bit more into how these things are modeled, maybe just to give it, like I'm just sort of thinking about these feet. I can't remember off the top of my head if that's how they look, but just making sure that your reference and stuff is kind of nice, because I feel like the chest is quite large here. It's just little proportions and stuff now, but it's those little subtle things that can really add to the scene. Your ground too is nice with a slight bit of reflection. I would even consider adding the smallest hint of a normal map, just to catch little bits of dust and stuff too that might be bumping off this area. And consider using ambient occlusion for where this would be casting nice close shadows on here. Like it looks like it's floating a little bit here. I can see the shadows here, but yeah, the positioning of it and the positioning of the light makes it look a little bit less real. Where I know it's 3D, but it's like positioning the light correctly can emphasize the strengths of this piece, rather than trying to like it'll make it seem more obvious these sort of flaws here if you're not lighting it correctly. And also composition seems pretty nice. I would maybe have gone for a bit more room on the edge here, just to have a bit more room around these two sides here, especially because it's quite a long model. So I would even maybe drop the angle of the camera a little bit more, cut the bottom and top off a little bit, maybe kind of like that, and then just making it a little bit wider, maybe a little bit more front on But it's, yeah, so just exploring with different camera angles and stuff too can really help how things are going. But so far, yeah, you're doing great. Like, that's a really nice model and stuff that you've got going on there. And I would assume maybe that it's rigged to pose too. If it is, that's badass, and I'd love to get a hold of it. But you're awesome, you're doing great stuff. All right, now we've got Srianan, I don't know. Newbie would like feedback on some of my game assets. High poly count is 2.2k on the mushroom. All right, so let's look at the first one you uploaded first. Okay, so if these are game assets, I'll try and keep that in mind when I'm giving feedback. The first thing is with this, your lighting is, if I'm looking at where the shadows are, it's pretty much from the top. If we're looking at the front of this model, I would just be dropping the camera angle down a little bit more so we can see the front, and maybe even considering 2 light sources of slightly different colors, maybe like I think you've got a blue light here, maybe just a slight yellow light, and just so then we can have now a bit more of the shape of the model. I would probably just look in as well into the camera angles too, just because I feel like this is giving a weird sense of scale with it, where like you might need to pull the camera back and then make the field of view a little bit smaller, just so it's a bit tighter and more flat, rather than it being so big and warped. But that's something just to explore on your own a little bit more. I would also look into your UV maps, especially if you're getting into game assets where your UV maps are your friend, and because the flow of the wood and compared to here isn't really flowing very well. Like, I'd just be making sure that all the grain and stuff is going in the right direction. And I do like the little textures and stuff that you've got going on here too. And I think you've got a slight bloom effect too, possibly. If you haven't, definitely look into adding a bit of bloom. But although in the game, you might not be able to have the rendering power for that, but it's just something to look into. I would look into maybe, I think you might have a bit of depth of field with this. It's just looking into those little extra effects. I feel like though the way that you've positioned, yeah, that's the other model. The way that you've positioned this is you're sort of hiding its strengths, which is its profile and the way that the person would be holding the gun. I would be probably just doing a bit more of a flatter look with it, just because I want to see the elements of the gun, rather than you've got this nice stream up here, which is really good, but you're taking away from the strengths and stuff of what you've modeled. And maybe just, yeah, like, it's hard to know about adding too many polygons and stuff with this. But yeah, like, it's coming along really nicely. I think the main things for you to look into is UV maps, how you're composing this image, and how you're lighting the image mostly. But in terms of modeling, yeah, it's really coming along. And so let's just have a quick look at these other ones too. Yeah, and so I would maybe just look into a little bit of the position, like, or the way that the part here of this model is put together. Maybe just like making it look a bit less boxy in this section here. And it is definitely fine around these edges here too. Like, I feel like because we know it's for a game, it does have that nice look to it. But I feel like this is kind of just removing it's taking my focus away a bit too much. So that's just something maybe to consider a little bit more. And again, with this scene, I would say you're probably using the same lighting setup as before. So it's just looking in, especially if you start using like a yellow light, it'll make this look a little bit more appetizing and stuff too. But yeah, no, like, composing this, it's quite a simple composition. Maybe just cutting like the tiniest little slither off this edge here, just so it's a little bit more in the middle. But that's just my eye sort of trying, it might be perfectly in the middle, but it's just the illusion of it. It's just minor little cuts and stuff here and there where it'd be so subtle that it's probably not even noticeable. And then we've got your mushroom here too. So I would look into anti-aliasing just to smooth out some of these jagged edges. And unless this is quite large, if it's for a game, I'd be looking more into using a normal map for this, just because if this was a mushroom, maybe if it was the size of a tree, yeah, you could like have polygons like that, but if it's the size of like a normal mushroom, I'd be removing a lot of the polygons and just using a normal map to get that detail. Maybe a few little bumps just for the more predominant bumps here. I'd also look into putting a HDRI in the scene if you haven't already, just to give those reflections a little bit more extra detail, as I think it's quite simplistic at the moment. And also using a slightly colored light again, just to give it a bit more life. Maybe using, I think you might have 2 lights going on, or maybe it's just a reflection, but yeah, using 2 or 3 different light sources. So using a key light to light up this area, and then a fill light to fill up this area, which would be like half intensity in another color. And then a bright light from behind, which will be doing the same effect as this reflection, which is just trying to show the edge of the model so it will stand out from this background a little bit more. But yeah, like I do like the light effects, like this sort of the bubbly look. It's a great model. I'm just sort of thinking about how you've sort of presented the model as well. I'd also look into the color choices too, like try and maybe make 10 different color choices. Do the really obvious ones first, and then do some really experimental ones and see which ones stand out to you. Just because I feel like that maybe you could use a bit more of a gradient on the stalk here, going from one color to another, but also just maybe having a bit more of a bluer top, or looking into like, say, just like reds and greens and purples and all different other colors too, just to see which ones you're happy with. But it depends on the game style and what you want. But so far, yeah, it's a great model. I really like the silhouette and stuff that you've got going on. And yeah, there's just a few little things to explore with your models, but so far you're going good, man. All right, then we've got Chris Aston, I think. Critique wanted any tips or tricks for polished realism. Okay, so we've got 2 separate images here. We've got like the nighttime scene and then the daytime scene. So in the daytime scene, probably just turn that fire off. We probably don't need that fire on, maybe. I don't know, unless this is a really cold sort of day. It looks like it could be because of the color of your light. I'm not sure if this is a colored light though, but I would look into maybe using a slightly colored light for that. If maybe if it is a colder day, like a slightly bluer light, or a really pale yellow light. I'm going to maybe just use this shot to look in the details, but like with this, you've really tied it together with the type of lighting. I would just say that in composition, that this is a little bit too close to the edge, so I would just move it over a little bit closer so we've got a bit more of a black area around the side, and it'll give it nice and close. So at the moment, this is like an exit point for my eye, and I don't want to be wanting to exit from this scene. I want to be able to stay in a whole lot more. And yeah, I do really like the lighting of this. But let's look at now the models in this. So picture frame is pretty good. It's pretty stock standard, like so there's not much to critique in that. Let's have a look. So these models are quite nice. Maybe consider adding a bevel if you haven't already. It's sort of hard to tell, but just so I can catch the light a little bit more. This is a little bit confusing here with its reflections. So maybe looking into what sort of HDRI and stuff that you're using, just to make sure that the reflections will give a bit of realism to it, because I'm not sure where these two are coming from. Like that would be coming from windows with those sort of lights, But if it's facing the other way from this other window on the side here, I'm sort of wondering where this is coming from. I would also maybe look into rendering with a higher resolution, just so that we can get these extra details here. But this sort of model here is really nice. You've got, I can see this sort of HDRI here, but it's hard to tell. Just maybe look into exploring different HDRIs just to get a bit of different reflections and looks and stuff. Or even just modeling the rest of the scene in the background here, even with using just images and stuff too, like just to place in certain things. Really nice lamp that you've got going on. I'm not sure that this would actually be emanating light at the moment if it's turned off. So maybe just thinking about the realism and stuff of that, about how a person would use the room. But nice reflection. I think the shadows sort of caught it a little bit there, so there's the reflection has stopped. So I'd be considering maybe about the slight placement of that, just so you can get it showing the strengths and stuff of the model rather than having it purely realistic, because sometimes you might want to just adjust it slightly to enhance the look of the models that you've got, rather than placing it exactly where everything would be, sort of thing, if that sort of makes some sense. I do like this model as well. It's got like a nice shadow and nice textures and stuff going along. And yeah, I think you probably have used bevels on the other ones because you've got a little bevel here, which is nice, giving it some nice realism and catching the light. I like that little fold and stuff there. This sort of bump is confusing me slightly. I think it's maybe the mix of the shadows and the way that the cushion is probably lumpy and stuff too. But maybe it's just something to look into, maybe just to add a little bit more bump here. Because of this just being this one scene, I don't want to be like confused by any sort of sections here. Like, this is different from taking a photograph, where sometimes in a photo things will not look real, where they definitely are, but now you're trying to make sure everything looks real even though it's not. And so looking at the things that make things not look real is just as important as doing all the correct things of like adding a bit of bloom and stuff here and reflection and everything like that. And yeah, like this sort of model is really nice. Maybe I would just be looking into a slight normal map, just so that it's got a little bit more roughness around in some areas, but that's just me. I like this little addition of the cable in the background here, and the power outlet looks nice. This is quite a harsh sort of corner edge here, so maybe smooth this out so the shadow is a little bit more subtle. This pillow here is a little bit too blocky, so I would be looking down at the seam of this pillow, possibly just tightening it up, adding some little imperfections and stuff, the folds, a little bit more in there, but that's pretty good. I really like this pillow here, about the how you're sort of showing the different thicknesses and stuff. That's really cool. And I really like the material that you've chosen for this pillow too, how it does look like a different material. Nice angle on the mug. I would actually consider maybe rotating the mug so the handle's on the other side, just so it's a bit more predominant, especially with this shadow, and it can just break up that abrupt like corner there, because on the other side here that pillow is doing the same thing. Maybe just looking into the position of this mug just a little bit, so it can go maybe over this pillow slightly, having the handle on the edge a little bit more, so it creates a nice sort of angular like mountain shape there. And yeah, this table's pretty good. I'd just be also looking into a bit of ambient occlusion if you haven't already, just to add a little bit more shadow under the table, just so it stands out a little bit more from like the top bit and then this bottom bit. And maybe also looking into the resolution of the texture that you're using on here, just because I feel like maybe it's slightly lower, like how we can see a lot of detail in this one, but it's a bit too blurred for my liking here, but that's just me. Like, I really like the rug that you've made here, that looks really nice. Really nice flow that it's got going on too, and the way that it captures the light. Nice metal reflection here, but I feel like it's maybe a bit too bright for where it is. So maybe just lowering the reflection slightly, or even in post-production, just lowering it a little bit more. I feel like this is a bit too grey. Maybe like just looking into adjusting the color slightly for it, maybe so it falls into the background a little bit more, or its positioning too, so that it's just a little bit behind this lounge, just so that we can change the silhouette of it a little bit more and it doesn't look as floating, or it doesn't look like it's floating heaps, but if it's behind something, it'll give just that little bit more of depth to this lounge here. Really like the cloth that you've got here too, although I feel like in some sections it's not fully going onto the lounge, so maybe you might need to go in there and adjust some parts yourself. These plants and stuff look great. This model is great too, really like how it looks. We've got, okay, so that's the wall there. Yeah, maybe, yeah, again, looking into ambient occlusion, just to add a little bit more of a shadow to this edge here, possibly. This is quite nice. Yeah, I'm not going to critique that too much because that's pretty good. I'd be pretty happy with that. The fire does need a little bit of work. Maybe even consider getting a photograph of a fire in there. Just because it looks quite boxy, like you can see how the polygons are flowing with it. So add more resolution and probably add a little bit more bloom and stuff to this, especially if it's getting taken with the camera. Sorry. And this is quite black. Maybe adding another light source just over in the distance here, just to give this a little bit more shape. But yeah, overall, really nice composition and colors and general modeling. There's just a few little minor things, and I'm not sure if this is actually modeled or not. Looks like it could be an image, but it's hard to tell. So just looking into maybe the resolution and stuff of this picture, or if you're modeling it yourself, just giving it the same amount of treatment as you do in here, but just, yeah, like adding that bit of blur. Consider also actually putting in depth of field, even though you might not see it, just adding it in there to give that extra little level of realism and stuff too. Maybe even just because it might blur just the front of this slightly. It's hard to know. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a whole lot of things to look into and helps you with your future. Nice. Okay, now we've got bit of presentation 1, magic sword. Need feedback. All right. So I do like the angle that you've chosen for this, but I feel like you could maybe have it presented in a few different ways. Like, it could be nice to have it a bit more flat and then going up and down. I feel like, and say with this area at the top, to present the sword in a nice, like, traditional sense, or to have it lying on, say, a bit of wood or in grass, like stabbed into grass with a bit of depth of field, just to give it a bit of scale and stuff too. I'd consider adding a bit of bloom so that these areas that are light shine off a little bit of light in and around it. But really nice choice of colors and stuff that you've got going too. I'd look into HDRI so that the reflections add a little bit more detail and stuff around here as well. Maybe adding just a little bit more detail on this section here, like just even a little bolt or something, just a little bit more of a bump. Just add a little bit more detail there. But nice gold brushed materials and stuff too. And I would consider with your lighting adding a slightly colored light and maybe a secondary light. So maybe one a slightly yellow or even green or something, and then adding a secondary light coming from a different direction. That could be like a blue or a green or a purple or something. It'll just show a bit more of the form of the model, as well as giving it a little bit more life. And maybe with these connecting points here, just adding a little bit more of a modeled part there, so it looks like it's got, you know, like a secondary like seam or something on there, rather than it being such an abrupt change. But that's quite nice too. And yeah, same around with this part here, maybe just adding like a little edge going around here, just to make it look like it's put into the gold. And because of this, oh yeah, I'd be looking at adding a bevel just around on these harsher corners here, just so it captures the light a little bit more. And yeah, because this is looking like a worn sword, I'll be physically adding in little notches and stuff into the sword piece, and try not to repeat the same texture. It's hard to tell, but it looks like maybe that you have repeated some parts of the texture, but I might be wrong there. Just looking in so that doesn't repeat so much. And I do like the sword material that you've got here, but I think adjusting the lighting and everything will really make sure it presents itself a bit better and just shows the strengths and stuff and like the shapes and everything that you've got here. So I would even I would model say a dirt ground, make some little grass things, maybe in some little rocks too, place it into the grass, so it's standing as if it's been stabbed in there possibly, and then even get go outside to a forest or something, take a photo that would be of the same angle that the camera would be, blur it heaps and have that as the background, and then just get a HDRI of a forest or something too. And then by throwing maybe some particle effects of like dust or something in the air, it can give a really nice feel of realism of that this sword actually existed. Or you could get like, say, some stone and stuff, and then having a stone wall, maybe some moss or something on the stone, and then having it lying on the ground in there as if it's like dropped from some necromancer or something too. Because I think you can now start to think about the context of this sword and where it exists and why. And I'll just check if cool. Okay, that's hopefully that helps. That's all I'm going to say for you at the moment. Thank you. And then we've got JP513 feedback practice. Okay, let's open it up. Okay, interesting. So, first thing is learn how to render, I would say, just so that you can get some nice actual renders coming out. This looks like it might be possibly for a 2D game. Because I was going to suggest looking at a different camera angle, but I think that if we're going to go for a 2D game, then this is fine. I'd be looking at using two different light sources, so having a slightly yellow light and a slightly blue light from two different angles, with the blue light being more to fill up the areas that the yellow light isn't capturing, and just having it maybe at half intensity. I would also then look into a background and stuff when you're doing an actual render, maybe a HDRI, especially if this is reflective. And I know that this is sort of still practice, but so I'd be thinking how this jumps up with no effort. I'd be looking at how it uses its tail to jump up, maybe like to come under it and then press it up. And I think also you need to look into your keyframing just a little bit more so it has a bit more of a natural look. Maybe using tweening and stuff too, and like easing of in and out so it becomes a bit more of a smoother feel. And looking into the use of gravity and stretching of the model slightly, so that when it comes around here, like say it stretches around just slightly, maybe even stretches in the eyeball too, just to give it that illusion of movement. Also putting on motion blur into your shot can really add in a nice amount of movement. And looking into the faster something is, the less keyframes it'll have like over the time, if that sort of makes sense. Like say if we come into here, we've got it all bouncing around here, and then it goes fast, but then it slows down before it actually grabs on. So I would try and have maybe even a similar amount of separation between keyframes as it's going along, and then when it stops here, when it's got a pausing moment, that's when you'd have a lot of keyframes. And then when it's speeding up, as you've sort of done here, having the keyframes further apart, and trying to get a nice smooth movement. So I would even be looking into using inverse kinematics for the end of this this tail, just so you can control it a little bit more, and possibly even looking into the use of physics and gravity and stuff too. So you can at least, even if you don't use that in your animation, explore how it looks in a more realistic sense. And so then you can have the tail actually like lose its attention, so it does sort of flap in the air a little bit more, to then bring back attention to it and curve it around. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things that you can learn from this, and you'll end up developing heaps of skills in time. And I would say that, yeah, this is still just practice, so don't be too harsh on yourself, just keep working at it. Alright, hopefully that helps. Cheers. They've got W Thomas 666. I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out so far. I feel I need to add more to it, but don't know what to do. Okay, let's open it up. So first thing is, this part needs to be lit up just a little bit more, because I feel like it's a bit too far into to the shadows. So I'm just going to create this, and then I'm just going to adjust the curve slightly just to punch it up, and then maybe have that a little bit darker. Okay, maybe just something like that. Okay, just so now we can see the details a little bit more. So I would say to it's so sensitive. Okay, I would say about like adding maybe a little bit more of the bevel here, just so we can smooth that out, unless this is for a game. But if we're going for realism here, yeah, just like smoothing that area out a little bit more. Maybe adding just the slightest bit of a bevel on the inside here, so it captures the light a bit more. And when you're using your lighting, especially if it's outside, using a slightly yellow light rather than a white light, which is what I think you've done, just because it'll add a bit more warmth to the scene, and a bit, it'll tie everything together a bit more. And then you can also add a secondary light going in another direction. That'll be like a lighter light that might be blue, just to capture the a bit more of the shape of the scenes, like of the model, sorry. And I'm not sure if you have, it's hard to tell, but looking into using a HDRI just to get a bit more of nicer reflections on things rather than just purely the scene. And I do like the textures that you've used on this. I really like the plants, although this does look like it's been reflected, so maybe looking into just mixing that up a little bit so it doesn't have that pure mirror image look. Yeah, you've got some nice little tufts and stuff around, and nice use of displacement maps. I think it's not too harsh, which is nice, because I can see some stretching in some areas, but it's not too predominant, like you can get away with that. And I'm not exactly sure what these things are here too, where it could be like, say, a bone or even like a plinth totem sort of thing. So maybe just giving a bit more context to that, even like, say, in the title of the image, or through maybe adding something that's a bit more relative. So say like it might be a skull, or it might be a few more broken pieces and stuff around. And I like your use of bloom and depth of field that you've got in the background here. Maybe just adding a bit more detail to the sky, so it's a bit more predominant in like terms of detail, and maybe adding a bit more stuff in the the background, like trees or a few more details of rocks. I feel like this is a bit too close to the edge here too, so I would just be moving it back, giving it a bit more breathing room, and then maybe even adding one or two of these bushes just in the corner here, just to give it a bit more of a foreground, and they can be blurred as well too, so that we have a bit more sense of depth, and a bit more of a focus on this. And what else could there be? I reckon like that's all I can probably say about that. Like maybe just looking into the direction of your lights too, so that you can present your models in a nicer way. Because you do have a bit of a story going on here, but I feel like the lack of detail in this is really making these areas hide. But yeah, so nice work, you're doing good, you know, keep practicing at it. Now we've got Sir Wesley, Desert Portal. Okay. So this looks like it might be like a mobile wallpaper, just in terms of the composition and like the size of the image. So I'm just going to go through believing that it's something like that. So I like the use of bloom and stuff that you've got on here. I really like the textures and everything too that you've got here. And I like the depth of field and everything you've got going on. Maybe add in a bit more detail into this white bit here. So you can do this in photo editing software, maybe just throwing over a texture. I feel like you can add a little bit more dunes and stuff in the background, just to give it a bit more of a sense of scale. Maybe even like little buildings and stuff, or trees and stuff too, just to add a little bit more extra detail in the distance there. Maybe a few more like little bushes or branches and stuff here, but it depends on the type of look that you're going for. I like the kind of carved look that you've got going on here. Maybe just looking in the direction of the dunes too, just to make sure that it would realistically fall like that. Maybe also the resolution of your image texture that you're using, just in case it's not too low a resolution. But I think it also might be a case of the resolution of your lights. So maybe just so that it doesn't have the as grainy a look, like it's more of a crisper look. I would maybe even consider adding a vignette around the edge, just to tighten it in, maybe just a little bit more. Maybe positioning this this slightly higher, just so it's not right in the middle. Just because it'll make a nicer sort of composition, I think, but it's up to you with exploring that. Maybe even adding a bit more detail in the sky, but again, it's up to you. I just feel like at least there needs to be a mountain here, just to keep it a bit more balanced. And in terms of lighting, I do really like your lighting. I think you've used a colored light too, which is nice. Maybe adding a bit more of a color to this emission here, even if it's just a slight purple, which it might be, but it's sort of hard to tell. And yeah, hopefully that gives you some information. Like, it's quite a simple piece, and it is quite nice with what the elements that you've got in there. But yeah, hopefully that'll give you something to work on. Cheers. Now we've got not geeking out. First time doing a fire plus smoke simulation. Any tips? Right, let's have a look. So first off, I'll just say in terms of composition, maybe just dropping the whole piece down a little bit so that you can crop it. Sorry, hang on, I'll zoom out. Cropping it a bit more equally in the middle, and so then it'll have a little bit more breathing room up the top here, a little bit less room down the bottom. But I really like the bloom and stuff that you've used, the lighting effects. I really like how you've stretched the bloom a little bit more, which is really adding to the lines of these pieces. The model looks really nice, except I feel like in some areas it doesn't have enough polygons, or your UV map is starting to mess up. So I would just be looking into that, and I would maybe probably use smoothing, or yeah, just adding normal maps, displacement maps, extra polygons and stuff, so we can have a bit more resolution for shadows. Also looking into maybe using an area light just to get a slightly softer look in some areas. I'm not sure exactly what light you're using, but yeah. I do like the lighting setup that you've got, where you've got the key, the fill, and the rim light, and especially of different colors. It really does show a nice depth to the model. And it looks like you might also have a HDRI that you're using to give a bit more reflection to this, which is really nice. And I like the emission textures that you've got going on. In terms of the smoke looks really nice. I think that you can explore just doing the render with a few different settings, just because I feel like it was meant to come out of the eyes here, so maybe choosing a slightly different position of the head, making it a bit more predominantly coming out of the eyes, and then having like maybe smoke also a little bit around here, but it is kind of coming down to your own artistic style now. Like, I do really like your use of colors and stuff too, but I think yeah, honestly the major flaw for this is the resolution of the skull at the moment, and just the composition a little bit more that could be improved. But yeah, hopefully that that'll give you some things to consider and stuff with your future works. Cheers. Alright, we've got inevitable guess, 2333, random. Alright, and then you've got two images here. So we've got these ones here and this one. I'm going to choose this one just to give a bit more critique on. This one, I do like the colors, but it is a little bit too grainy too in some sections, so maybe just consider upping your resolution, not only maybe for the lights, but the image itself. I feel like, yeah, it just is a little bit too grainy in some sections. Okay, and so I feel like with the lighting, I really do like the sun, but I think it could be a bit more predominant especially on the side here for this character, just to make them stand out a little bit more from the stairs. Possibly it might change the style a little bit, but adding a bit more of a bevel to these stairs so that it can catch the light a little bit more. But that might not be the look you're going for. With this model here, I like that it's covering up the sun a little bit, but I feel like its level of detail is a bit, like in terms of the texturing and stuff, a little bit distracting compared to the simplistic nature of this sort of like, what is it, like that vaporwave kind of look that you've got going on. But I do like it. It is quite grainy as well, so it's hard to really give much critique on how you're presenting it. But I'd look into maybe the use of normal maps if you haven't really already. Like it looks like this maybe just be the texture, and maybe adding a bit more polygons and stuff into these areas, like a bit of a bevel, so it becomes a bit of a smoother transition from the shadows. And yeah, but in terms of composition, it's pretty nice. Like it's a little bit too weighted on this side because of this piece here. So maybe considering adding something small over on this side as well to balance out the picture, or down on the bottom here. It's yeah, it's hard to sort of say what could be added, but yeah, nice use of colors. And yeah, hopefully that, like, there's not much else I think I can say about this really, but hopefully that gives you some sort of things to go off for the future. Yeah. Right, now we've got the Funko Cliffside Bait and Tackle after a couple of grants, tutorials of course. Grant's great, he's great. That's how I started Blender. Alright, so nice use of composition here. Maybe I would just drop the model down just slightly, just so there's a bit less room down here. And maybe just the slightest bit more up the top, so there's a bit more breathing room up the top. In terms of lighting, I would maybe use a slightly colored light or two lights. It's hard to know how many lights you have got going on here. But just because by using a slightly colored light, it'll tie everything together a little bit more. And by using two lights too, you can present the shape of the models a little bit more. So obviously you're going for a low poly look, which is really nice. So I'd just be maybe going in and looking into the actual colors of these greens. I feel like you could have chosen a slightly better color. I feel like that's probably going to be something that you'll need to go through, like say with the red here and like the grass and even the stone. It's just now making them not as pure of their colors. So say like with these rocks, maybe giving it a slight brown look, but as well, once you add in the colored lights, it'll really change these, and then that should be when you go in and adjust the colors of the materials after you've colored the light. Just because I feel like this is quite a sort of neon green, and I feel like you could just make it a bit more subtle by making it a bit more brown. I really do think that yellow light will add to that. I like the nice text and stuff here. Maybe just looking to the type of font that you've got going on too, so that it'll fit the style of the scene that you've got going on. Maybe like a bit more of a stylized, simplistic, thicker sort of writing. Even maybe giving the text a bit of dimension, like making it 3D, just so it can catch light a little bit more. With these shingles and stuff, make sure that they actually go under probably this first beam here and are a little bit tighter together. Just it'll give that a bit more of a realism and stuff, and then how they're going under the beam, it'll give a nice seam of that top beam there to make it look a bit more built and everything. Maybe even making them a little bit smaller too, giving it a bit more detail, because if we look at it in terms of dimensions and proportion, these bits of wood would be where a person would be standing on, and so then this shingle would probably be about the same size as their head, especially as it's the same size as the door. Like that'd be the size of their body. So I would be probably making it a little bit smaller, maybe even the size of this window here. Like it's hard to say, but just exploring with the size a little bit more, as it's quite large. And maybe just looking into how you've got smoothing on here. I think the position of your lighting is something that you really need to explore too, just because of how adding even in a HDRI to have a bit more of interesting reflections rather than the pure white could be really good to explore. And then having the water to have a bit more of like a translucency, just so that we can't see right down into the bottom, and we'll just give it a bit more interest, a bit more realism. But yeah, it's just now down to doing some slight changes, which is always a bit hard, like especially because there's not many polygons to go off. But say like just adjusting this this leaf a little bit here so it doesn't look like it's cut so much, like it's two separate pieces, just making it flow a little bit more naturally. But that'll come with practice, and that'll come with looking at the models a little bit more. And now looking into this mushroom here too, it does stand out because it's quite more rounded. So I'd be looking into, yeah, the little ways that you've built these things, just to try and get the style to connect up a bit more. But that's going to come with practice, and also I'd also maybe look into the background too, maybe using a slight colored background, like even like, I don't know, a light blue or even an image or something, just to give it a bit more of an interesting background. It looks like it is at night, so maybe even a darker blue. But yeah, like I think maybe start considering to extending these pieces out and creating a full scene rather than just a blocked section. But that's now a step up for you, and that'll be good for you. Yeah, all right, thanks, great work. Also, oh yeah, I think you've got a bit of bloom and stuff on there. But yeah, just looking into bits of bloom and stuff too. You're doing good. All right. Now we've got Cleric. Any tips for making it more cozy? Okay. So first thing I would say is using a slightly yellow light will make it a bit more warm and everything too. and that would probably just be with this light here, and then having the slight blue light coming in can make it look like it's cool outside, so then we'd be drawn to this light a whole lot more. And so if we are drawn to this light, maybe putting that a bit more in focus and a bit more in the middle. So I would actually try and make everything a bit smaller, and that would be by using the field of view to make it a bit more shrink, so then things aren't as big and warped, and which will change the sort of shot a little bit more and maybe make it look less large. But if you're wanting things to be cozy, you might want to make them feel like they're huddled up in there and getting under the roof and being able to get close to that lamp and everything too. And I would say just make sure to look into your texturing, so that the materials don't repeat as obviously as well. Maybe using a slightly higher resolution texture too. I really like the use of this bed, but maybe to make it look more cozy too, changing the colors slightly of it, of like say some deep reds and browns and stuff, something that people would want to snuggle up into. With the mug too, maybe just change the angle of the mug so we can see the handle just a little bit more, just so it's just a little bit more predominant. But also consider about how a person would have put this down too, so you can have it realistically. Like, it's sort of, people probably wouldn't put the mug down like that where it's so close to the lamp, but that's just me. And I think in terms of coziness, yeah, field of view and color, like especially making this a bit of a darker wood, making it that sort of, like, I'd be looking at architecture or hotel images of people out in the woods, like the type of coloring and stuff that they use to make it look a little bit more cozy, because you want to bring a bit more contrast to this sort of dark, dreary, cold area out there. So using nice warm colors and stuff in here, maybe even adding like some extra models and stuff along here, like candles or other things that could bring warmth. Like how sometimes people have those salt lamps and stuff, but maybe that's not the look that you're wanting to go for. And yeah, like that's probably what I'd say. I'm just gonna get this to be a little bit brighter, and I'll show you what I mean. So edit, paste as, new image, colors, curves. Okay, yeah, so there's not, I'd be looking in as well into the black wall that you've got going on there, because I feel like you need to maybe add a little bit more detail into that back area there. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so something like that, where it's a bit more yellow, a bit more warm and stuff too. And then maybe, yeah, adding ambient occlusion down in these edges here so we can really see those shadows more. Maybe cutting out these two slats here and then moving the heater up a little bit closer, just so then the image is a little bit closer. So I think composition, and also maybe even some beams of light coming down as can be nice, as if it's like a slightly dustier room, maybe, if you wanted to. But yeah, I really think adding that bit of yellow, giving a bit more warmth, and the composition will really help it. All right, next person. Hope that helps. So we've got Frostymon Blender, attempt at making Earth on day 4 of Blender. Okay, cool. So nice use of stars and stuff in the background. What I would first consider is using a secondary light source on here to just add a little bit more to the shape. So, and using colored lights too. So assuming that this would be lit up by the sun, just giving it a slightly yellow look, and then maybe a slight blue look on the other side here, as if it was lit from the moon. And now the things that I'm looking into most is just the resolution of some of your textures and stuff here. Now this might be procedurally generated, but it's just adding a bit more detail and stuff to that, because I can see a lot more detail on the land here. And so just looking into those sort of details, because for a picture of Earth, I'd want it to be in like really nice high resolution. So looking into your resolution and stuff too. Adding a bit of bloom and stuff too, so things shine a little bit more. And maybe making this area here a bit more colored, like slightly blue for the atmosphere, and a bit more of a blur going up onto the side of the Earth there. In terms of composition, it's quite good, although I'd want to see this lit up first before I can make any major judgments about composition. But you could make it a bit more of a square image, and so it looks like it was shot, and it's like a nice tight picture as someone's taken a photograph, just because it'll keep it nice and balanced, because it's basically a pure circle. But yeah, no, that's nice. Hopefully those sort of things give you a bit of idea of what to change and what to look into. Alright, now we've got the Lost Egyptian. Apart from the noise, I don't know what I can improve for this scene. Any feedback or comment would be helpful. Thanks in advance. Okay, so the first thing I would say is composition. So this is quite in the middle, maybe just putting it slightly to the side. So moving the camera a little bit, so it's just a little bit off center. Or you could have a little bit of a tighter, hang on, what I'll actually do is I'm gonna put it into here, and I'll try and crop it myself. Paste as new image. So I would maybe crop it, crop to selection. Something maybe a little bit more like that, maybe like just so it's a little bit tighter around the actual focus, which is the piano. Maybe you could have brought it back a little bit more, but like that's just something to think about, because there's a lot of room on the top and bottom that isn't really doing much for the scene, and I feel like it could be better to just bring it in a little bit more. In terms of modeling and stuff, so I like this lamp. I feel like this lamp's on when it might not need to be because of the sun coming through, but I like that blurry look and stuff that you've got going on. I'm not sure if you've added depth of field, but that's something to look into, as well as looking into adding bloom, so things have a bit more of a shine and stuff to them going outward. Looking into ambient occlusion, so that things, when they're joining up, they'll have a nice little shadow around the edges here. Looking into adding a HDRI so that it has some more realistic reflections of a room around it, rather than just probably nothing that's modeled around on the other side, like behind it over here. And I would look into also adding a slight bevel onto some of the edges that are a bit harsh. I can see you've added one here, and it does look really nice, just capturing that little extra slither of light. Maybe just giving a bit more of a smoother curve or something to this, maybe making this paper slightly translucent, or subsurface scattering, like using that so that light goes through it in a bit of a different way rather than a solid model. I really like this sort of cloth and stuff that you got going on there, and then the plants and everything too. And I do like the color of light that you've used, but I think that maybe you could adjust it a little bit more in terms of the angle to present the model a little bit more, and maybe giving it a little bit more of room away from this wall to make it a bit more realistic. It'll just give it a bit more context, as if like a person would probably give it a little bit more room there than maybe having a nice big plant just next to the wall there. But then I guess it would cut off this part here, so maybe moving that a little bit over. Maybe also with this lamp here, maybe moving it slightly to the side, and then having this plant, I don't know, maybe it's just thinking about the composition of the things on the top here. So there's nice like hills and stuff that you've made, and not things maybe standing on their own so much. So if anything, I would maybe duplicate this and putting it in front of this plant here, so it gives a little bit more depth. And then maybe having this lamp a little bit off to the side, so it'll create a nice curve with these golden pieces here and then up into the lamp. And then you could have another little plant or two on either side of it, just to give it a bit more depth. Yeah, hopefully that makes some sense, and hopefully that helps you give a little bit more like stuff to add into this piece. Alright, then we've got Lindsay SCN. Like, any advice on lighting or materials? Alright, let's open it up. Okay, so the first thing is, looks like it's slightly reflective, so maybe I would look into either modeling stuff for it to have in its reflections, or using a HDRI to give a bit more detail into its reflections. And in terms of lighting, I would say that the front should be lit up a little bit more. I'm just going to bring it into here just to try and do some lighting or something with it. Yeah, I feel like it could just be a bit more like predominant. So if that's what it was from that, like just making it really pop out a little bit more. Giving maybe a bit more of a shadow onto the ground, so we have a bit more of a reference of where it is. Looking into composition, so maybe drawing the camera back slightly so that we can see that shadow, and cropping the top a little bit more, maybe the slight movement of positions and stuff. But I would say that adding a slight bevel as well to this model will help it catch the light around the edges a little bit more. And looking into having one light source, where I think you might have two going on here, like a slightly blue and maybe a slightly pink or something. Having two light sources where one's more predominant than the other. So I would have maybe one light source coming across this way, which would be the key light, and then a secondary light source coming on this side that'll be a bit less intense and of a different color, just to fill up this area a little bit more. And I would, lighting materials, yeah, I would probably add in just slight material, like a slight normal map to the object, just to test it out, of maybe like a brushed look, or like a brushed metal, or maybe just some imperfections, as in like finger smudges and stuff, to make it look like a more realistic model. And yeah, like hopefully that covers a whole lot of things that can get you started on mucking around with it a bit more. But yeah, no, it's cool. Alright, next person. So we've got Atomic Polygon. I'm trying to show how inefficient it is to just use a toothbrush without flossing. What can I adjust to make it more realistic? Okay, ugh, this looks disgusting. Okay. So in terms of the actual modeling and stuff, I'm pretty happy with that. Like you do have a good sense of modeling, and also good use of toothbrushes and stuff too, like as in the way the toothbrush moves. I like the way that you've got it breaking off a little bit more. I would say maybe using ambient occlusion possibly to give this area just a little bit more shading, if you haven't already, like just giving this bit more of a seam possibly. I would look into stuff like subsurface scattering, if you haven't already, to make this, the skin actually be more see-through and stuff. And with lighting, like, because it looks like you've got a HDRI possibly on here for reflection, but I would use a slightly colored light too. Maybe you've like a yellow or a blue or something, or even two separate lights. Probably quite subtle in their coloring too, because you want it to look quite natural, but just so then we can give it a little bit more form. And give it a little bit more warmth to the shot. And also with the actual movement of it, it's hard to see, if this is the only shot that we're seeing, it's sort of hard in the beginning to see all this extra dirt on the teeth. So maybe presenting the teeth first before you brush, so having the brush away and then putting it up, just so that we can get a bit of a sense of how much you're actually scraping off. And possibly just like putting the lighting up just slightly, just so that it's a bit less grey and just a little bit brighter. And also maybe adding in depth of field just slightly, so that we have a bit more focus on these teeth, and these are just slightly blurred. And you are using a bit of motion blur, which is nice. Just gives that bit of extra realism and stuff too. Yeah, I think that's all I would really say. Maybe like looking into a different variation of the background. Say you could take just a photo of a room that's nicely lit and then just blurring it out, just so it has a bit more of as if this person is here somewhere in a room. I know that you are missing the teeth and stuff too, but it can just give a little bit more context, like, and a little bit more of like a homely vibe and stuff. But honestly, yeah, like it's disgusting and that's great. And yeah, also probably looking into the material of these teeth, using slight like looking into how people would make materials for teeth. I would say that there'd be like some slight translucency or something, or like, you know, that subsurface scattering and the amount of reflection and stuff that they've got, just to make them look a little bit more realistic. And yeah, and so now it's getting into making more like shaders and stuff, and different materials and everything too that maybe you haven't explored fully yet. But yeah, hopefully that gives some direction into where you should go with it. Really like it. Awesome work. Now we've got Zod the second, Mark 8 from Endgame. Mark 85. Okay, awesome. Okay, so obviously, like, it's a very nice materials and stuff that you've got going on. I would just be looking into your lighting just to make sure it's maybe just a bit brighter. Maybe you're just a slightly colored light of like a yellow and a blue. It'll just give a bit more warmth and stuff to the scene, and just add a bit more shape. I'd also look into the direction of your lights too, just to maybe light up this chest just a little bit more. And maybe using a bit more of a texture on these gold pieces, just to give it a bit more of a brushed look, because they're quite simple at the moment. And maybe trying to not stretch your textures too much over here, so looking into UV maps. And also, if you haven't already, getting a HDRI for your reflections, and considering the back of the scene, just maybe adding in something simple rather than it being black, like, I don't know, just a few different walls and stuff that are lit really simply. And in terms of composition too, I would probably move the camera like down a little bit, just so that the head is a bit more in the top of the scene rather than right in the middle. I really like the bloom effect sort of thing that you've got going on here, but I think you need to add bloom in some of the other areas just to make it shine just that little bit more. I really do like the effect that you've got here. I feel like the part where this is maybe a little bit too quick when the mask comes up here. Just to maybe make it a bit slower, possibly giving that a little bit of texture too. But that's, yeah, it's a really nice sort of look that you got going on. Maybe just adjusting the slight color of the gold. I feel like it's just slightly off, but once you change the color of the lights, if you're going to do that, then I would be going in and looking at the coloring changes too. But yeah, no, nice. Alright, so then we've got Phantom 190, first sculpt, but used the wrong flare tag thingy, no worries. Not sure about the mouth, or even if he should have one. Any other feedback is greatly appreciated. Alright, I'm going to open this one up just because it's a bit of a nicer render in terms of got the background and the model seems to be presented a bit nicer. Okay, so let's look at the basic elements. So what were you asking first though? Not sure on the mouth, or even if you should have one. Okay, so let's have a look at the mouth first. So I would be maybe thinking about why you're creating this character first, and then that should determine if it should have a mouth, like if you want it to animate and talk. But in terms of artistically speaking, because we have facial recognition in our body, you should have something down here, maybe even just like seams or something like lines coming down to present some detail there. I would say that the biggest thing for you to think about at the moment is if we look at just this eye, there's a lot of detail, say in the brow, and then we've got the eyelid and then the eye itself. Try and think of adding a similar amount of detail in terms of like contrast and like maybe scratchiness, I guess you could call it, into the other areas. And so obviously this is going to be quite a flat area, but you can add in just say little wrinkles and stuff too. Maybe they could be quite soft, but it'll help catch the light in a bit of a more interesting way, especially if they've got this sort of sunken eye look here. Just adding maybe a little bit of a more predominant sort of look to it. Same with on the nose, just sculpting it a little bit more. Like what I would say here is you've got the basic shape, but I think you can just sculpt it just a little bit more and making it look more natural. Another part to strongly consider is once you've sculpted it as much as you can symmetrically, go in, and this is the risky part, you got to know when you're done, is just going in and adding just slight asymmetrical things, especially down in this section here, just because it'll make it look more natural and realistic rather than purely mirror image. And in terms of lighting, it looks like possibly you've got like 3 lights going on here maybe. You've got like green light, it's sort of hard to tell, but basically I'd be using a colored light instead of this white light. And I do like the use of blue, but I'd be also looking into yeah, I think you do have a HDRI in here. I can sort of see it in the eye, I think. But maybe just having something that's a little bit more predominant to show reflections, just maybe a little bit more. And then also looking into subsurface scattering for like making a more skin type texture, which could make this have a little bit more life in it. It depends on the type of look that you're going for. And I'd also say maybe you can cut off the edges here of this render just to compose it a little bit nicer, make it a bit more focused on the actual image rather than all this extra air in the side here. Look at it from all angles as well when you're modeling so that it's got a nice silhouette. So especially from the front and the side, making sure that the silhouette is quite interesting and flows nicely and stuff. And use some reference material because it's quite bulbous at the moment, and if that's the look that you're going for, try and really enhance that, because I would say that the eyes sort of aren't really fully fitting in to the full bulbous nature of say this chin and the forehead and then the side here. So either choose one side or the other and really try and extend it a little bit more. But yeah, like, it's going good. I think it is like a first sculpt, and the first sculpt's always really weird and funny, but yeah, it's just, you'll slowly build up on it. Learn the tools, explore all the different tools, and which ones work best. As you're building your sculpt, do it on a really low resolution first and really push it as far as you can before you go up to the next resolution, and keep pushing those resolutions, the lower ones first. So it'll look really boxy, but as you go up, you'll the polygon topology and stuff will be in heaps nicer positions to move stuff around, and you won't be having heaps of detail in areas, like heaps of polygons in areas with no detail. So it's just good to find the like, watch some tutorials on the methods that people use, the different variations, and also, yeah, just the different tools that they have around these days. But no, it's a really nice, good sculpt. Okay, so and we've got Jacob 1. So happy with my new project. Any tips? Alright, the first tip I would say is just learning how to render. Just going in so that you can have a nice render, and then doing it in a nice high resolution picture, especially so we can remove some of these like extra little gizmos and stuff here, and then getting it as like a full render. I do really like this texture and stuff that you've got going on here. It looks like it might be like a portal to something. And then you've got nice use of bloom. And in terms of the composition of this section here, it's really nice. I would just say maybe moving the portal thing to the side here, and maybe moving this big section to the side here, as well as adding another one of these, like say seaweed things in the front section here, as well as this side, to have them a bit more in the foreground, and using a depth of field to blur the whole section, like so that only the portal and a few of the reeds and stuff are in focus. We'll just add a whole lot more depth to it. Maybe adding a texture to these reeds, or like this seaweed too, or even a normal map, just so they capture the light in a bit more of an interesting way. Maybe also looking into ambient occlusion, just so that we can have a bit more shading and stuff around on these connecting points here. Maybe adding some more bumps as well on the ground. Looking into adding maybe some rocks too, and ones seaweed of different thickness, so thinner ones that are longer, so I can add a bit more of variation between them. And maybe adding in some particle effects of like, say like murky dust or something, as if this is in the ocean, just as like little flakes or something following along in the sea. But yeah, no, that's the sort of stuff that I would probably say that you could look into adding into this. Mostly though, just learn to render. It's not too hard to do a quick render of like just a low resolution. Just learn how to do it once, and you'll get better at it in time. But yeah, no, it's going really good. Okay, and then we've got FMMC16, work in progress bedroom, feedback is wanted. Okay, so we've got this one picture. Now first, it's quite dark, so I'm just going to come into GIMP, and I'm going to up the brightness just a little bit, just so I can see it a bit better. And so now I can actually see the models and stuff that you've got going on. So I'm just going to methodically go through each sort of model first, and tell you things you can change and adjust. So I do like the sort of stylized look that you've got on this window here. It could be nice to make it a bit transparent and adding some stuff in the background that you can see in the distance, even if it's just a few different colors, just to add a bit more depth to it. With this window here, probably add a bevel around the edges of this, as well as looking into the UV map and how you've textured it, so that we don't have these long bands, where I would say you've probably projected it from the view rather than creating a UV map and having it all nice and equal. It is difficult, but it's something really definitely to look into. And I would say it would be the same on this window here. Same with these books, looking into a slight bevel, maybe adding in, especially on the bottom sections here, a little cut in part, and then just adding maybe a yellow texture so it looks like it's pages there. I really like your little lamp thing that you've got going on here with its glass, and its sort of reflection and the light and stuff that's going on. I'd probably look into adding bloom so it shines off a little bit more light. I really like the texture that you've chose for this bookcase, but again, looking into your UV maps, just getting heaps better at those. Maybe looking into the different variations of color and stuff on these books too, just so even maybe taking some photos of spines of books and using them as the UV maps. As well with the lights, trying to use a slightly colored light, so it's maybe slightly yellow. Because even though it'll look white, it'll just have a slight yellow look or a slight blue look. And now onto the bed. I do like the sort of cloth falling that you've got going on here. I think you can explore different variations of this to make it come out in different ways. Maybe also adding a secondary like throw that will go over on one of these corners here. It'll just add a bit more realism and depth and stuff to the scene too. Again, I think that UV maps is something for you to really explore into, just because of the different direction of the lines on what I would say is the mattress here. It's just something maybe to make practice so that you do things by like you're choosing to do them rather than things accidentally happening. But yeah, like, and just again adding a bit of a bevel around these, just so it catches the light a bit more. I think you have used a HDRI possibly in this, but if you haven't yet, it's just something to look into to get a bit more realistic reflections and stuff. This is a really nice chair. I would say though, maybe just adding some more polygons around to the corners here, just because it's slightly jagged in some areas. Possibly, like it just looks like it could just add a little bit more in there, look a bit nicer and smoother. And again, yeah, same here, just beveling and looking into the direction of your UV maps. I'll look into ambient occlusion too, to just add in some shading and stuff into the edges like of the walls and stuff here, and when things are close. I do like this rug and stuff that you've got going on here too. It's quite nice. Again though, probably just looking into those UV maps just to make sure that you're getting what you want to happen and it's not stretching. And probably also adding a normal map to this wood on the ground, just so it has a little bit more grain and it will catch the light in a different way. And now if we just zoom out and look at the composition, I would say the composition is quite nice, except I feel like that this light over here is really taking my attention. So possibly even turning that light off or removing it, just so that I can have a bit more focus on this bed here. But I think that you need to look into your lighting just a little bit more before you get too heavy into composition, and just trying to think about where you want your focus to be. So if we come back to that original piece, yeah, it is quite dark, where you can just even brighten these lights up and then maybe even have a point light maybe in the middle of the room, just lighting everything up just lightly and stuff. But that's something to explore. Hopefully all those points really help you in getting a bit more direction in what you need to learn and stuff. Okay, now we've got Thuderic, I think that's what it is, having some issues with my imported Revit model, but starting to get the hang of things. Okay, let's have a look. So, first things first, I'm not sure why this is floating. Just maybe considering the positioning of that, or making it look more connected, or having some more things in there. I would say your composition needs just a little bit of work. I would probably just drop the camera down slightly so we can see a bit more of, say, where this first pillar joins into the ground, and cutting off a bit more of the top of the image here. Maybe even cutting out, like, or even turning the camera slightly more to these plants, and probably adding like a little plant or two over in the side here if you feel like it. With your HDRI, so you can see the HDRI there. I would either build something around that can fill in that space, or like get a higher resolution one, because you can sort of see that this isn't blurred, it's just lower resolution. I would also look into, with your lighting, using a slightly colored light. If you haven't already, it might be slightly colored, but it's hard to tell, just to give a bit more warmth to the scene, and maybe also considering the direction of the light, just to give it a bit more interesting shadows and stuff, maybe on this ground here. And yeah, it looks like there's some strange things going on with this here, as if maybe there's two shadows, or there's just something incorrect going on here. So I'd just be looking into what's happening here. And I would look into also rendering in a higher resolution, just so that there's not as much artifacting. Also looking into your UV maps so that they line up correctly on these seams, and then also how we don't get this banding and stuff down here too. I would look into bloom too, so that some of these wider areas shine lights a little bit more. And I would look into depth of field too, just to add a bit more realism of focusing on something. But I feel like you don't have a focal point in this image yet, so I would look into it, and you can form that by changing the direction of the lights, and looking into your camera angle. So you might be focusing maybe even on this red flower here. If you get it in a nice lighting, then you can have this in the background, maybe in a sort of blurred depth of field look. So just thinking about that sort of stuff, as well as maybe getting a higher resolution part for your wood here, and maybe adding a bit more of a texture using a normal map or something to give it a bit more bump, as well as adding a bit of a bevel around the edges so it catches the light a bit more. Hopefully that gives you a whole lot of things for you to look into and helps you out for the future. Now we've got push kafoho, need feedback. Okay. All right, so this is really nice. Really nice emotional sort of scene. I will just bring it into GIMP just to brighten it up a little bit more, just so I can see it a bit better. Because I feel like for you, the colors and lighting is going to be really important. I don't want to lose that sort of darkness and stuff that you've got. So just to bring it back, yeah, so pretty much I'm just brightening up those lights just a little bit more, because they are the focus in this. I feel like you need to look into the resolution of your lights, and I'll just gonna undo the curves. Yeah, so just need to look into the resolution of your lights so it's a nice smoother sort of look. Will take longer to render, but it'll look heaps better. Also, I would say these is from HDRI, the stars in the sky. So I would probably just get an image as the background, or something like that, so that it doesn't have as lower quality sort of blurrier look and a slightly stretched look. I do like the trees and stuff that you've got going on here. Maybe just give it another consider about how brown some of these leaves are. Like, it's just something I think maybe you should just question just for a second time and think, but it's up to you. It still looks great. It's just I feel like maybe they're a bit too red in some areas, but it's hard to know what you're going for. I would also look into maybe just bloom in itself, because I would say this is like you're using volumetric lighting and stuff here. But yeah, I would also just consider maybe adding a little bit of bloom too, to just smooth it out. I like the haze and stuff that you have got going on. I feel like the composition of this though could be a little bit better. how we're looking at the background here. Like, if you think about if someone was to take this photo and walking around the scene, I feel like it could have possibly been better to be like looking a bit more straight on, like say through the onto the seats and stuff here a bit more with this I would say bus stop. It is also thinking, where is the actual bus stop sign, if there is one. Now this might be probably from some other country, so I don't know how it works in those other countries, but it's just something to think about. And in terms of modeling this, maybe just giving it a slight bit more reflection, and considering any sort of lighting from behind to even maybe from a different color, like a red or a blue, just to light it up differently if you haven't already. But overall, yeah, like I think just composition is something you need to work on. Just go and look through a whole load of different camera angles. And that might mean you might need to build up the scene a little bit more, but it could be good just to have a full scene that then you can rotate the camera around and place things in a whole lot like differently, like even to the point where you might have a little like coffee cup or something on this seat down here, and then that becomes the primary focus. So then there you can still capture all the bus stop and the trees and the lights, but then you have a whole lot more stuff in the foreground too, as well as in the background. And I think that's also something that's missing from this, is there's not much stuff in the foreground really that's balancing out the image as a whole, as well as I feel like this silhouette of this bus stop could be presented in a bit more of a smoother way, like a better way, just to see it a bit more. But yeah, like I think overall though it's a great piece. Good like eye for color, and good use of haze and things like that. But it's just those little things now that you just need to work on. And composition is something that everybody's trying to work on. But no, yeah, nice work. Okay, now we've got Nihiro 23 BC, just a simulation. Okay, so let's have a look. Cool. Awesome. All right. Okay, so let's just go through it real quick. The models in the back and stuff look really nice. I would just maybe look into the UV map, just because I think you were trying to go for a curve here, but then it stopped. So maybe just try and consider how you can smooth that out a little bit more, and using a bit more of like just maybe a bit more of reflection. Just looking into the material of this. Adding maybe a bit more polygons and stuff around the tops here, just so I can curve a little bit more and capture the light more realistically. And with your lighting, maybe using a bit more of a slightly colored light, and maybe even possibly two lights from two different directions. So maybe a slight yellow and a slight blue, which can just give a bit more form. I really like the material and stuff that you've used on this. Like it looks kind of like a milky color maybe, but and like really nice strands and stuff that are coming off here. And nice shapes and stuff that you've got forming over here, and also like a nice sort of subtle indication that you're going to go onto the outside here. I feel like it's streaming out a little bit in a strange way as it's coming out there, like it's pulling the rest of it out. So maybe just looking into your sort of settings for the fluid dynamics. And I would probably just cut the, like I know this is sort of probably just an experiment and stuff, but letting the fluid flow a little bit first and cutting off the start of it as it's setting there. So probably just like cutting it like, so we start around here, let it fester for a little bit as it comes up. And yeah, and just looking into some of the settings of how it's moving around, because some of it does start to flow out down in this section here without like like it sort of expands with not much reason, which, hey, it's just a look. But in terms of the actual look of everything, it's really good. I like the slight vignette you've added on there too. Maybe even consider adding a little bit of bloom if you haven't already, just to make that light shine a little bit more. But yeah, no, that's like, it's really cool. I really like it. There's only just, yeah, a few little things that I would probably change about it to make it look a bit like smoother and stuff. Okay, now we've got Kazawak, I don't know how to say that. Root beer in progress. I plan on placing it inside a dinner scene, but any critiques so far? Okay. Nice. Okay. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Maybe I would just consider first off how you've lit the scene. Maybe just using slightly colored lights from 2 different angles, probably to maybe match the types of lights in the background there. Maybe like a yellow and a slight red or blue or something, or a few different ones, just because I can see that it's probably just the one light here, maybe, that's lighting things up. And then you've got the reflections behind it. But I do really like the stream of water. Maybe it's a bit too heavy on the amount of perspiration and stuff that's come off it. And I like the little swaying and stuff too, and then the slight deflation of the head. I also think that maybe the mug could be redesigned a little bit differently, just to have a bit more of an interesting shape here, but maybe use a reference for a mug if you haven't already, just to get maybe a slight more realism and stuff to it, but it depends on the look that you're going for. I'm assuming you're going for realism. I like the use of bloom and the HDRI and stuff that you've got in the background and the actual model itself. Maybe just having the head be a bit more stickier to the walls a little bit more, but it's sort of, that's just me. Nice use of color and stuff on everything, and like the movement through the glass. I think it's really nice. Now hang on a sec. Oh yeah, have you got a bit of motion blur in there? I'd probably just look into motion blur if you haven't got that already, just to make it a nice smooth swish. Yeah, and like composition is nice too. It does come right in the middle. Maybe you could explore doing it slightly to the side. But I guess it depends, because this is still a work in progress, so you're just trying to present the model. But yeah, composition is generally pretty good. You've got a nice amount of room at the top and a nice amount of room down the bottom. And yeah, no, nice work. Okay, last person with a quite a strange model here. We've got the Blue World. This is probably my most realistic render of Sizzy Pickles. I have more of him. Most realistic pickle ever. Does this look somewhat realistic? Okay, so let's have a look. Now, I think it might just be that you're joking about it being realistic, because, you know, like, I feel like though you're developing it in time, but let's just have a proper look. I'm going to make it a bit brighter, just so we can see it a bit better. And I'll give you some little tips and stuff on what I think. Okay, yeah. Alright, so first thing, I'd probably smooth out the this sphere, so it's got shade smoothing on it, and possibly even modeling the pupil, so it's black, and then maybe even modeling the highlight too, if you'd feel like it. I do like the hair, how you've combed it around. It is starting to look quite nice. Again, probably adding some more polygons into the tongue, just so it can be curved a bit nicer. It's sort of a bit messy, this area here, and so I'd be looking into maybe just making this a bit more clean, but I think what will make that look better is adjusting the lighting. So having two lights, one from this angle and one from this angle in slight color, so maybe one slightly yellow and one slightly green or blue. It'll just give a bit more form to the shape. And for this, just maybe adding a normal map to give it a bit more texture and stuff on the ground here. And using a bit of bloom too, so that there's a bit more brightness on where the white areas are. I like this background. I think that if this is like grass, maybe just giving it a bit more variation in terms of thickness, in curve, color, and maybe just slightly adjusting the color so it's a bit more of a natural color. But I think once you've changed the color of the lights, you can adjust it all then. Composition is pretty good. I would probably though cut it a little bit tighter, giving a little bit more breathing room on this side of the face, so that they're looking into the area with more room. It'll just give it a bit more of a tighter look and look a bit nicer, so we don't have all those extra little sections and stuff. And probably also dropping down the edge of this table so it's maybe just a bit more off center, like on the bottom third, rather than right in the middle. Again, it'll just make it a bit more interesting and stuff too. But yeah, so far that's really good. I think hopefully that's helped give a bit more of a direction that you could go and stuff to explore with all these stuff. And that is the end of my video. Well, thanks everybody who's been putting up Blender projects for me to that needed feedback that I can talk about. Hopefully I really helped some people there. Alright, bye bye.